The quiet storm asterisk, you're not what we're looking for. Those 5 words sank like cold metal into Clara Dawson's chest. She stood stiffly in the glaring fluorescent light of the recruitment center, her application file still clutched in both hands. The man behind the desk, a sergeant with the kind of mustache that suggested he'd never heard of the 21st century, didn't even look up as he handed her back the forms. Clara blinked. Once. Twice. No tears. Not yet. I meet all the requirements, she said evenly, voice calm but coiled like a spring. On paper? Sure, he said, finally glancing up. But paper doesn't move through walls or take down threats. SWAT needs firepower, presence, command. You just don't fit the bill. Translation. You're a small woman with soft eyes and a gentle voice. Not exactly the action movie hero type. Clara forced a smile. Thanks for your time, Sergeant. She turned on her heel before her pride had a chance to get run over. Where it all began, Clara wasn't from a long line of military greats or SWAT legends. She wasn't even from a long line of people who knew how to use a cordless drill properly. She came from a tiny town tucked between wheat fields and rusted-out barns in Kansas, where people measured success by how many pies you brought to the church bake sale. Her father, Walter Dawson, was a history teacher who thought World War II. Documentaries were the peak of cinema. Her mother, Lorraine, was a nurse with a stubborn heart and a kitchen full of healing remedies, half of which probably belonged in a witch's spellbook. Clara had always been the quiet one, the simple girl who helped neighbors fix their fences, tutored the failing football players, managed to comfort a crying toddler and rescue a stray kitten all before second period. No one in town would have ever guessed she had dreams of joining SWAT. Heck, Clara barely believed it herself some days. But it started with a moment. A very specific moment. The fire that lit the match. She was 21 when it happened. Clara was visiting Wichita with her mom, running errands and enjoying the city's modest chaos. They were in a hardware store because where else do Kansas girls go for mother-daughter bonding? When the world cracked open, a scream, then 2, someone shouted, "He's got a gun." And suddenly time slowed down, chaos poured into the aisles. Shelves clattered, people ran. The guy holding the weapon didn't look like a criminal. He looked scared, desperate, like someone who'd run out of options. Clara didn't freeze. She didn't panic. She moved. She led a young mom and her 2 kids through the side exit. She grabbed a shop clerk frozen in fear and pulled him behind the storage crates. She even remembered the layout of the store enough to shout directions to people on the other side of the shelves. By the time the local SWAT team arrived, Clara had helped a dozen people get out without so much as a scraped knee. She wasn't armed. She wasn't trained. But her calm under fire was impossible to ignore. One officer pulled her aside afterward. "You've got good instincts," he said. "Ever think about joining law enforcement?" She had, but until that moment it felt like something meant for people with gruffer voices and broader shoulders. Now, it felt possible. Necessary, even. Training daydreams and reality checks, the road to SWAT wasn't exactly littered with welcome mats. Clara enrolled in police academy with the enthusiasm of a kid signing up for summer camp, involved being tackled, screamed at, and pepper sprayed before lunch. She was underestimated from day one. "You sure you're in the right class?" One recruit smirked as she tied her long hair into a bun. "Pretty sure," shot back, then pinned his overconfident self in a wrestling drill 30 minutes later. Oh, she wasn't just in the right class. She was there to lead it. Still, no matter how high she scored on exams, how fast she disarmed fake bombs, or how flawlessly she moved through obstacle courses, there was always that quiet judgment. That look, the kind that said, "You're good, but not SWAT good." SWAT, as everyone whispered, was for the elite. The bold, the brawny, the loud. Clara was a whisper. But whispers, when focus, can cut deeper than any shout. Application denied, which brought her back to the rejection. She'd passed every preliminary test. Physical, mental, psychological. Heck, she even impressed the SWAT sniper trainer with her ridiculous accuracy, earning the nickname Eagle Eye, which she wore with quiet pride. But none of it seemed to matter. You don't have the presence. Another officer had told her. SWAT is about intimidation. Command. You don't exactly scream storm the building. She wanted to scream something all right, but instead, she packed up her training gear and headed back to her little apartment, where a poster of Mae Jemison, first black woman astronaut, in case you're not up on your trailblazers, smiled encouragingly. From the wall, she didn't cry. Not really. Just sat there. For hours, but by sunrise, a plan had started forming. They thought she wasn't SWAT material. Fine. She'd train harder, learn more, get better. So good they couldn't ignore her. Anymore, if they wouldn't open the door, she'd find a window. Heck, she'd tunnel under the wall if she had to. Enter the Phantom Program. That was when she stumbled across something whispered among academy circles. The Phantom Program, an unofficial nickname for an advanced tactical training boot camp designed to push already elite officers into next-level readiness. It was brutal, voluntary, not affiliated with any one department, but heavily scouted. Participants trained in everything from underwater ops to hostage negotiation. Only about 10% finished it. Clara signed up without blinking. She wasn't doing this for a badge anymore, not just for the respect. This had become something deeper, a promise to herself. To every simple woman told she wasn't enough, she would make it. Not because she had to prove something to the world, but because she was finally ready to believe it herself. The breaking point asterisk, Clara didn't arrive at the Phantom Program with swagger or flash. She didn't show up wearing shades or chewing gum like she was about to star in a gritty police procedural. She came in quietly, like a storm on the edge of the horizon, noticed by most, underestimated by many, and absolutely ready to tear through whatever stood in her way. The Phantom Program wasn't officially affiliated with any one agency, but it had the unspoken authority of a secret rite of passage. The trainers were ex-SWAT, military special ops, and intelligence legends whose resumes were so classified they could probably write a whole season of a spy thriller with just their breakfast routines. The entrance to the facility was hidden behind what looked like a storage depot in Colorado. The cold greeted Clara like an unkind handshake the moment she stepped off the transport truck, her boots crunching against the snow with a sound that seemed to echo louder than necessary. There were 20 recruits total. 19 of them had one thing in common. They were big, loud, and convinced they belonged there. Clara, on the other hand, moved with the calm efficiency of someone who had stopped trying to impress people and started focusing entirely on execution. The first day wasn't orientation. It was annihilation. The trainers didn't ask for your name. They didn't care about your resume or how many push-ups you could do back in your comfort zone. No welcome speech, no mission statement. Just a whistle blast and a brutal sequence of drills that felt like being thrown into a meat grinder made of humiliation and muscle fatigue. Within 3 hours, 3 recruits quit. One claimed a sprained ankle. Another simply walked off mid-sprint and muttered something about having left the oven on at home. The third, well, he tried to argue with one of the instructors and was kindly escorted off the premises with a dignity-saving explanation that didn't involve the words disaster in cargo pants. Clara didn't speak. She didn't need to. She moved from task to task like a machine with a human soul, methodical, relentless, and silently observant. She didn't have the height or the sheer brute strength of the men lifting logs twice her weight, but she had endurance and balance. Her brain was her most finely tuned muscle, and she used it to conserve energy, anticipate patterns, and respond with a precision that made her stand out without even trying to. The instructors began to notice. During a particularly savage tactical simulation that involved crawling through mud under razor wire, Clara didn't just finish. She helped a struggling recruit whose shoulder had given out halfway through. Recognition. She didn't do it because she wanted to play hero. She did it because that's who she was. Someone who believed that strength wasn't proven by stepping over others, but by knowing when to lift them up. But not everyone appreciated her approach. Among the trainees was a man named Briggs. He was the opposite of Clara in every way: loud, muscle-bound, and utterly allergic to humility. Briggs had served in the military, boasted about breaching doors in Afghanistan, and referred to Clara exclusively as the daycare drop-off. His contempt wasn't subtle. Saw her as soft, too measured, and frankly a distraction from what he believed the program was about. "You move like a yoga instructor. It's not a SWAT officer," he told her after one drill, his voice dripping with amusement and condescension. Clara looked him straight in the eyes, her face unreadable. "And you talk like a man whose muscles are trying to do his thinking for him." That was the beginning of a cold war between them, one that simmered beneath every team assignment, every hallway exchange, every glance during morning runs. He was threatened by her calm. He was irritated by his need to dominate. It wasn't until week 3 that things came to a head. The program introduced what they called the terror room. It was a full-on psychological endurance test arc, loud, disorienting, and intentionally designed to simulate the chaos of real world. Tactical missions gone sideways. Trainees were blindfolded, separated, and subjected to everything from simulated hostage negotiations to being screamed at by actors, playing panicked civilians and aggressive suspects. The idea was to see how each candidate responded to overwhelming pressure. Clara was thrown into a scenario where a bomb had been planted inside a crowded building. She had 6 minutes to extract 2 hostages while keeping the situation from spiraling. Sirens blared. Smoke machines filled the room. She couldn't see clearly. The voice of the hostage actor was sobbing incoherently, and fake gunshots rang out every 30 seconds. Briggs, watching from the control booth, snorted. "She's going to panic." But she did. Clara dropped to one knee, focused on breathing. She ignored the screaming, filtered the chaos, and locked onto patterns. The voice of the hostage? It wasn't random, it looped certain phrases. The smoke patterns? They were uneven, meaning the vents were clustered on one side of the room. She used it to navigate. At one point, she used a dropped metal clip to create a sound distraction and slip behind a wall unnoticed. 5 minutes in, she had both hostages extracted and had located the bomb, a blinking device hidden under a desk behind a metal shelf. She didn't just complete the mission. She solved it faster and more efficiently than any other recruit had that day. When she exited, her face was streaked with grime, sweat dampening her sleeves, but her eyes were steady, no shake in her hands, no gloating, just that same calm fire. Later, one of the instructors, a retired hostage negotiator named Alina Cruz, pulled her aside.
Where did you learn that level of control?"
Clara smiled softly. "I grew up with 4 younger cousins in one bathroom. You'll learn a thing or two." Lena chuckled. "You've got a future, Dawson. Don't let the loud ones drown you out." But the pressure kept mounting. By the 5th week, the physical strain had worn most people down to splinters. The schedule was punishing, grueling obstacle courses. At dawn, advanced marksmanship drills, hand-to-hand combat, psychological evaluations, and classroom strategy sessions that could fry a genius's brain by lunchtime. Sleep became a luxury. Injuries piled up. Friendships frayed. Clara began noticing how easy it would be to quit, to quietly slip away in the middle of the night like some already had. But every time she thought about giving up, she saw the faces of the people she'd helped in that hardware store. She heard her mother's voice saying, "Kindness is strength, baby girl." She remembered the look of surprise in the eyes of every person who'd ever told her, "You don't belong." She belonged. She just had to prove it the way she knew best, through relentless, quiet excellence. The final test was legendary. The Gauntlet, it was a 12-hour full scenario simulation involving hostage rescue, wilderness tracking, breach and clear operations, tactical medical response, and high-stress leadership challenges, all done in teams. Clara's team, led by Briggs. Of course, it was no accident. The instructors were testing them. Could oil and water survive a mission? At first it was chaos. Briggs barked orders. Clara adjusted silently. But when his plan to breach a compound failed, triggering a mock explosion and setting off a chain of scripted casualties, he panicked. Clara stepped in. She took control of the team, delegated roles, assessed the fake injuries, and recalculated the entire mission strategy on the fly. Briggs resisted until he saw the plan work. One by one, the team began following Clara. By the end, she had led the successful extraction of all hostages, stabilized the wounded, and navigated a sniper-infested escape route with the kind of poise that made jaws drop in the observation room. When they finished, Briggs said nothing. He just nodded once, a silent admission of respect. At graduation, Clara didn't expect a parade. She didn't care about a shiny certificate or a badge of honor. She just wanted the one thing she had been chasing all along, the knowledge that she had truly earned her place. She got more than that. Alina Cruz stepped up during the ceremony and made a quiet announcement to the gathered instructors and watching officers. "There are leaders who shout," she said, "and leaders who serve. Today we recognize a woman who led not with volume, but with clarity, grace, and resolve. Clara Dawson, you didn't just pass the Phantom program. You redefined it." The crowd, hard-edged, scarred, cynical, gave her a standing ovation. The shot that shook the silence, Clara Dawson stood in front of the tall, gray double doors of the SWAT training facility in Fort Collins, Colorado, the same place where she'd once been turned away with polite indifference and an unspoken smirk. Her palms were steady now, her gaze sharper than ever. The cold concrete and steel exterior didn't intimidate her anymore. It reminded her of something else. Resilience. It reminded her of herself. There was no dramatic fanfare to mark her. Return no rival theme music or gasps from the officers walking the halls. She didn't need recognition. That wasn't why she came back. She was here because something inside her refused to accept the narrative written about her the first time. Not good enough, not intimidating, not SWAT material. But she didn't. Return with vengeance in her heart.
As she came back with evidence.
The Phantom program had sharpened her instincts, deepened her leadership, and tested every ounce of her endurance. She didn't need anyone to believe in her now. She believed in herself. She checked in at the front desk with a nod, her name now carrying weight behind it. The officer at the front, a different one from last time, younger, probably fresh out of his own academy, recognized her name. "You're the one from the Phantom program, right? The one who beat Briggs's record?" Clara offered a modest smile, something like that. The buzz among the instructors had already started. She could feel it, little side glances, whispers under breath. Some were surprised she was back. Others looked curious, even cautiously, hopeful. But she wasn't there to impress them with gossip. She was there to earn the spot that had once been denied. The SWAT selection process was infamously brutal. It wasn't just about brute strength or fast trigger fingers. It demanded clarity under pressure, speed with strategy, and the ability to make life-or-death decisions in real time. And this time, Clara wasn't just a number in the system. She was under the microscope, watched more closely than anyone else, because everyone wanted to see if the simple woman with the sniper's eyes was truly ready. The tryout began, like most of them do, with drills designed to break bodies and fry nerves. The obstacle course was first, and it had evolved since she last saw it. High walls, rope climbs, water trenches, weighted runs all strung together with a sadistic sense of timing. Clara didn't aim to set a record. She aimed for precision. Her steps were deliberate, her breath regulated. While the others were huffing and scrambling through the mud like caffeinated bulls, she was already scaling the final wall with a fluid motion that earned a few raised eyebrows from the instructors. Next came the team simulation, a hostage rescue. Drill inside a warehouse rigged with pressure sensors, noise distractions, and hostile targets. Each candidate was assigned a role. Clara was placed as second in command, directly under a confident, heavy-set man named Ruiz, who clearly felt uncomfortable handing her any authority. He gave her quick, dismissive instructions and kept cutting her off when she offered tactical suggestions. The simulation began, and predictably, it unraveled fast. The team breached too quickly, failed to clear a blind corner, and Ruiz misread a target's movement, accidentally killing a hostage in the simulation. The red lights flashed, indicating mission failure. One of the evaluators even rubbed his temples in frustration. Ruiz, red-faced and defensive, muttered something about faulty instructions, Clara said nothing. She didn't need to. Her composure in the chaos had been recorded by every camera and logged by every data monitor in the room. Even in the failure, she had remained calm, calculating, and most importantly correct. The instructors took notice. And so, during the next simulation, she was assigned the lead. Now the warehouse looked different. She didn't rush the breach. She waited 3 seconds longer than the average team, with just enough time to read the noise patterns and identify that 2 of the gunmen were positioned above the team in a scaffold. She adjusted their entrance angle, avoided triggering, a dummy explosive planted at chest level, communicated with hand signals so clear and confident that the team moved like a machine behind her. They reached the hostages in under 3 minutes, extracted them cleanly, and neutralized all threats without a single misstep. When the final hostile dropped and the red lights flashed green, indicating mission success, a silence hung in the observation room. Not the stunned, confused silence of disbelief, but the rare, begrudging silence that occurs when people realize they may have been wrong about someone all along. Still, there's one challenge left: the marksmanship finale, a series of high-pressure shooting drills, moving targets, time-restricted accuracy tests, and the infamous thread the needle shot. This particular shot required a candidate to fire through a tight window between 2 moving pendulums into a target that appeared for less than a second. Most candidates failed it. The ones who succeeded often barely scraped a hit. Clara had seen videos. She knew the timing, had studied the rhythm, had practiced versions of it during her Phantom training. But nothing quite replicated the real thing. They saved it for last. One by one, the candidates stepped up. Ruiz missed by 3 inches. The next officer clipped the outer edge. Another choked completely, firing before the pendulums cleared and hitting the barricade. Clara watched silently, her breath even, her fingers relaxed. When her name was called, she stepped forward, her hands gripping the weapon with the ease of someone greeting an old friend. The range fell silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Clara adjusted her stance, sighted down the barrel, and waited, not for the opening, not for the crowd, but for the breath. She exhaled and fired. The shot sliced through the moving window so cleanly it looked like a film edit. The bullet struck the center of the target, dead center. Not just a hit, it's a bullseye. For a moment, no one reacted. Then someone whispered, "Holy hell." Another instructor stood and muttered, "No one's done that since he." Didn't finish. Silence said it all. Clara lowered her weapon, eyes steady. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply walked back to her place, as if she had done nothing more dramatic than turn in a paper on time. But inside, her chest was thrumming not from adrenaline, but from the slow, quiet joy of proving that the doubters were finally officially out of excuses. The final evaluation meeting was held in a small room with metal chairs, coffee that tasted like regret, and a board of evaluators who had long since learned how to mask their feelings. Clara sat at the end of the row. Names were called, results given. One candidate was praised for teamwork. Another was asked to reapply in 6 months. Then it was her turn. The head evaluator, a tall, hawk-nosed man named Captain Rollins, looked over his papers for a long moment. Then he met Clara's eyes. "Dawson," he said, and everyone in the room seemed to lean just slightly forward. "You came here with something to prove?" She said nothing. He nodded. "Well, you proved it. That was it. No parade. No epic speech. Just the words she needed to hear. Words she had earned through every drop of sweat, every sleepless night, every setback she refused to surrender to." After the meeting, as the newly selected officers filtered out, a few offered nods of congratulations. Even Ruiz gave her a reluctant smile and a fist bump that might have caused him physical pain to deliver. But Clara didn't need their approval anymore, as she stepped into the cold Colorado air once again, this time as an official SWAT candidate. She looked up at the sky, gray and unyielding, just like the world she had fought through. But now it felt different. Now, she wasn't just facing the storm, she was the storm. The first mission? Asterisk. There's a difference between training and reality, razor thin. It's a rattling difference that doesn't show itself until the moment you hear a voice crackle through your cum saying, "This is not a drill." That was when Clara Dawson knew her life was about to be divided into two halves, before the mission and after. 2 weeks had passed since Clara's flawless marksmanship performance and official induction into the SWAT unit. The gear now fit her like armor, not just in size, but in significance. Her name was on a locker, her badge carried the unmistakable glint of hard-earned credibility, and her uniform bore the SWAT patch that once seemed impossibly out of reach. But even in that atmosphere of hard-won respect, she knew the stares still came, less doubting now, more curious. Who was this woman who moved like quiet lightning? Could she hold that line when bullets were real and the clock wasn't a training countdown but a life-or-death stopwatch? Her team was the Fort Collins Tier 1 Tactical Response Unit, led by Lieutenant Marcus Leland, a man whose face looked like it had been carved from gravel and whose voice always sounded 2 hours short of a decent nap. The team had a reputation for results. No unnecessary violence, no grandstanding, just clean tactical efficiency. Leland didn't smile often, but when he did, it meant something. Clara's role was as support sniper and interior breach assistant, a dual responsibility that spoke volumes. They trusted her shot. They were testing her inside. Position to be in? Both the guardian angel on the rooftops and the surgical knife in tight hallways. But Clara didn't flinch. She never had. The mission came on a gray Thursday, just after sunrise. A call was dispatched from the local precinct, an armed hostage situation in an industrial park just outside the city. Disgruntled former employee had taken control of a warehouse, locked the staff inside, and was reportedly demanding national media coverage and a helicopter escape plan that reeked of many late-night crime dramas. Local officers had tried negotiation, but the man identified as Ellis Boone, 39-year-old ex-machinist with a volatile mental health history, had already fired shots and wounded a security guard who tried to intervene. By the time Clara and her unit arrived, the site had already been cordoned off. News vans were circling like vultures, and a tense crowd of employees, family members, were crying and pacing behind barricades. The energy in the air felt like electricity static, bitter and ready to ignite. The command center was hastily set up in a mobile unit just off the parking lot. Leland stood over a digital blueprint of the warehouse, studying entrances, potential cover spots, thermal readings. "We have 15 hostages inside," he said, voice like sandpaper. "Boone is armed, possibly with more than one weapon. He's barricaded himself in the center assembly room. We've confirmed one wounded already. This is a Class 3 engagement. Standard sweep and breach protocol. Clara, you're going on Overwatch 1. You'll have visibility on the eastern quadrant windows on the second floor, give you sight lines into 3 target areas." She nodded once, already calculating angles and contingencies. Her rifle, cleaned and calibrated just that morning, was slung over her shoulder like it was an extension of her spine. And Leland added, almost as an afterthought, "Be ready to shift inside if needed. If the breach team stalls, you're the contingency." Her stomach didn't twist. Her pulse didn't spike. She was built for this. She had chosen this path long before she knew the full weight of it. She loaded into the transport vehicle without hesitation, her mind already constructing maps and probability trees. There was no place for nerves, only action. By the time she was in position, lying prone on a flat rooftop across from the warehouses, East Wing, she had counted 3 confirmed hostiles, Boone, and 2 possible accomplices. She noted every movement, every shadow that danced across the warehouse floor through the high windows. Her scope caught glimpses of terrified faces, hands, tied behind chairs, people huddled beneath desks. It wasn't a simulation. It was real. The team moved like clockwork. One squad prepped the rear entrance with silent cutters. Another worked on breaching the loading bay. Clara kept her eye on Boone, watching his erratic pacing, the way he pointed the gun at shadows that didn't exist. He was unraveling. Fast. Hold. "Your fire," came Leland's voice in her ear. "We're almost ready to breach. Clara, if he lifts that weapon toward any civilian, you take the shot." "Understood," she said softly. The seconds dragged. Boone began shouting again, slamming something metallic against the concrete floor. The hostages winced, ducked lower. Clara adjusted her aim millimeter by millimeter. Then it happened. He grabbed one of the hostages, a woman in a blue jacket, yanked her to her feet, dragging her to the center of the room and pointing the pistol at her head. Her screams echoed through the glass, but the audio didn't need to reach Clara's ears for her to feel the terror. This was the moment. "Dawson, do you have the shot?" Leland asked, urgency threading his voice now. "I have it," she whispered. "Take it." She exhaled once, just as she had at the range. But this time the stakes weren't simulated. This wasn't a paper target. This was a human life on the line. Her trigger finger was the only barrier between salvation and catastrophe. She fired. The glass didn't shatter, exploded. Boone dropped instantly, the shot precise, striking him just below the orbital socket. No suffering. No second shot needed. The woman fell to the ground, crying, still alive. Target neutralized. Clara. "Confirmed. Move. Move. Go," barked Leland, and the breach teams flooded in. What followed was chaos wrapped in efficiency. Clara descended from her rooftop and moved to support clearance inside. The air was thick with fear and sweat, but the mission was ending. Hostages were recovered, suspects subdued, wounded stabilized. The team worked like a living organism, and for the first time, Clara was truly inside, it no longer the question mark, but a vital organ. As the ambulances rolled in and officers began herding journalists away from the scene, Clara stood off. To the side, helmet tucked under her arm, her eyes scanning the area like a sentinel. One of the EMTs, a short woman with a sharp gaze, stopped to speak to her. "You're the one who took him out, right?" Clara gave a single nod. "You saved that woman's life. Probably a few others too. Cleanest shot I've ever seen." Clara didn't know what to say to that. Compliments always felt awkward when the stakes had been life and death. Instead, she simply said, "Glad she's okay." Later that night, in the dim light of the locker room, the team gathered, not in ceremony, but in mutual exhale. Leland walked in last, holding a cup of what was either coffee or motor oil. "Good work today," he said. "Nobody died." Nobody froze. That's the kind of mission we remember. Then he turned directly to Clara. "And Dawson, hell of a shot." She felt something then, not swelling pride, but a quiet weight lifting. Not because she'd impressed someone, but because she'd lived up to her own belief in herself. Because this mission hadn't been about proving her worth anymore. It had been about using her skills to save lives. She walked out into the night, tired but whole, and for the first time since she began this journey, she felt something that had always seemed elusive: peace. The fallout asterisk, the morning after the warehouse operation, Clara Dawson woke to a silence so thick it felt alive. For the first time in months, her alarm didn't ring. Her gear wasn't packed for a training drill. Her boots sat by the door, still crusted with dust and blood from the previous day. She sat up slowly, the events of the mission already replaying in her head like a film reel caught on loop. The shot, the fall, the woman's scream, the stillness that followed. It slept, but only in the most technical sense.
The kind?
Of rest that feels borrowed, not earned. The peace didn't last. By 7:15 a.m., her phone lit up with a text from Officer Klein, one of her teammates. "Turn on the news. You're famous." Clara frowned, rubbed her eyes, and flipped on the small television perched in the corner of her modest apartment. It didn't take long. Every channel had its rotating footage of police lights, SWAT vehicles, and a still frame of Boone's body being wheeled out on a stretcher. But it wasn't the operation itself that captured the public's imagination. It was her. Anonymous female SWAT sniper, credited with saving lives in Colorado, hostage standoff scrolled across the ticker, and within the hour, anonymous vanished. A shaky cell phone video had leaked footage from a nearby rooftop, filmed by someone who had seen her take position. It zoomed in just enough to catch her face behind the rifle's scope, her expression still and unwavering. That was all it took. The internet did the rest. Her name, her training record, her underdog story. Within 6 hours, she had her own hashtag, It wasn't the kind of recognition Clara ever wanted. By noon, local news vans had set up near her apartment building. She pulled her hoodie tight and slipped out the back entrance, the weight of every curious eye pressing against her spine. When she arrived at HQ, the hallway felt different, quieter, colder. Some faces smiled, too wide and too sudden. Others looked her over like she was a walking headline, even accidental, changed everything. Leland called her into his office, where the blinds were closed and a stack of folders sat untouched on his desk. He didn't waste time. "You did your job," he said. "No one's questioning the shot. Tactically, it was perfect." Clara nodded, unsure whether a thank you was appropriate. It felt hollow, but he continued. "The mayor's office is getting calls. Civilian Oversight Committee wants a review standard protocol, but they're not happy it happened on camera." Clara blinked. "You mean the video?" Leland nodded, his jaw tight. "People see what they want to see. Some see a hero. Others see force. Some think you should have waited for negotiations. Others say you saved lives. Point is, doesn't matter what actually happened. The story's already moving." She sat still for a moment, staring at the corner of his desk. She had expected to feel something after the mission? Closure? Pride? Instead, she felt suspended, like she was watching her own life unfold from behind glass. "I didn't do it for attention," she said quietly. "I know that," he replied. "But attention doesn't care about intention." A week passed. Then another. She kept her head down, showing up for drills, filing reports, helping train a new batch of recruits. But the silence around her grew thicker. Some colleagues whispered, some praised her too loudly, as if trying to prove they were supportive. Others avoided eye contact altogether. One even asked, "So, how's it feel being the girl who pulled the trigger?" It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't even a question. It was a test, and Clara refused to bite. The real blow came during a mandatory internal review.
Al, the civilian?
Board. Composed of 7 members, none with SWAT experience invited. Her to a session meant to clarify tactical judgment in use-of-force scenarios. The phrase sounded sterile, but Clara knew what it really meant. They wanted her to justify why she ended a life. The hearing was held in a clean, wood-paneled room with fluorescent lights too bright for comfort. Clara wore her uniform. She kept her voice steady as she walked the board through the operation. Target behavior, threat level, hostage position, timing, confirmation, execution.
Atch!
She explained that had she waited even 1 second longer, the hostage might have been dead.
Yep.
The voice didn't crack. Her facts didn't waver. But even as she spoke, she could see doubt flickering behind 1 or 2 of the board members' eyes. Not from what she did, from who she was. Because a man in her position might have been called decisive. A woman? Trigger-happy? That unspoken double standard wrapped itself around every question, every follow-up. After 2 hours, they dismissed her. No clear verdict, just a "we'll be in touch." Clara walked out of the building, jaw clenched, stomach tight. Not from guilt she had made the right call, but from frustration. Because the very same skill that had saved a life was now being twisted into controversy. It wasn't Boone's death that made people uncomfortable. It was the fact that the shooter was a woman who never flinched. She found solace in unexpected places. Officer Juno, one of the unit's tactical drivers, brought her coffee one morning and said simply, "You did what the rest of us couldn't. Don't let the noise change your aim." Even Briggsy sent her a message. Not flowery, not dramatic, just 3 words. "Saw the shot," followed by "damn." But no message mattered more than the one she received on a quiet Friday evening when the sun was just beginning to dip behind the skyline. Envelope unmarked was slid under her apartment door. Inside was a handwritten note. "You saved my daughter. No words will ever be enough. But thank you, Lydia Harper." The name meant nothing at first. Then she realized Dit was the mother of the woman Boone had grabbed, the hostage she'd rescued with her shot. Clara read the note 3 times before setting it on her table like it was a sacred object. That was why she joined. That was the point. Not the praise, not the press, but the people. And yet even that peace was soon tested. A new case emerged. A string of kidnappings across the state, linked by a pattern of precise, militaristic execution. The suspect? A former tactical officer turned mercenary? The case hit nerves and the department rumors swirled, suggesting the SWAT unit itself could be a target. As tensions rose, the captain made an unexpected announcement. Clara would lead the surveillance coordination. His task force, it wasn't a promotion. It was a challenge. Some people think you're just a good shot, Leland told her bluntly. I think you're a tactician. Prove me right. And just like that, the story changed again. Now she wasn't just the woman behind the rifle. She was being asked to track a ghost, manage a team of seasoned officers, and build a net tight enough to catch someone who knew every inch of their playbook. The hunter and the ghost asterisk, the briefing room was colder than usual. Not in temperature, but in mood. Every officer present sat with shoulders a little stiffer, jaws a little tighter. The board at the front displayed grainy surveillance images. A white van near a highway exit, a blurred figure slipping through the shadows, a tactical vest half visible under civilian clothes. This wasn't just another operation. This was war on familiar ground. Lieutenant Leland stood by the front, expression carved from stone, voice clipped with urgency. We're not dealing with an amateur. It's our suspect Caleb Rourke's, former. Tier 1 SWAT, honorably discharged 6 years ago. Went private for a while, then disappeared. Until now. He clicked through more photos. Rourke at a gas station. Rourke caught on a hunting camera near a forest trail. Rourke's handiwork. Zip ties. Coded messages. Expertly placed surveillance gear discovered at 2 kidnap scenes. Clara sat near the back, silent but laser-focused. Recognized the patterns immediately entry points chosen for minimal exposure. Exit paths that avoided cameras. Hostage protocols used not for rescue but control. Rourke was not improvising. He was executing a strategy. Leland continued. He's responsible for 4 kidnappings, all connected to people with prior law enforcement ties. 2 are confirmed alive. 1 is in critical care. The last we don't. No. He turned to face the room fully. This is personal. This is precise. And this man knows exactly how we work. A beat passed. Then he pointed at Clara, which is why Dawson is leading this one. The room shifted. Not a single groan or objection. Just sharp attention. She had earned their trust the hard way. Clara stood, nodded once, and stepped to the board. I've reviewed his patterns. Rourke's not hunting victims. He's testing. Systems. Every site he's chosen has been within 10 miles of a tactical response hub. He's watching us, learning how we react. She drew a line across the map with a red marker, connecting 3 sites like they were chess moves, and his. Next move will be here Pine Creek Dam. Remote, elevated, multiple entry points, limited civilian traffic. It's perfect for surveillance, hostage leverage, and a long-term standoff. Leland watched her silently, then gave a small nod. Then that's where we stop him. The operation began 48 hours later. A mobile command center was positioned 5 miles out from the dam, while Clara coordinated a 2-pronged infiltration plan. The first team would approach on foot via the northern slope, a rocky incline with high exposure. Risk but direct access to the dam's control building. The second, her team, would rappel down from the cliffside under the cover of night. But this wasn't just about tactics. It was about psychology. Clara knew the type. Rourke wasn't just hiding. He wanted to be found. He needed to prove something, too. Expose a flaw in the very system that had once praised him. And that meant he wouldn't run. He'd prepare. He'd dig in. Wait. As night fell and the forest swallowed them in silence. Clara moved with ghost-like precision, her breath shallow behind. Her mask, her earpiece crackling only with coordinated check-ins. The air was heavy with fog and tension. Every step was deliberate. Every signal measured, her team reached the cliffside first. Ropes were lowered, gear checked. She led the descent herself, boots crunching silently on gravel as she touched down. On the lower ridge overlooking the dam's base, thermal scopes lit up with heat signatures. 2 bodies near a fire, one large. Likely Rourke. The other bound. Hostage confirmed. She raised her fist, a silent hold signal. Visual confirmation, she whispered. 2 targets, initiating phase 2. That's when the radio crackled, not with her team's voice, but with his. Rourke. You're good, Dawson. Quiet, patient, like a ghost yourself. Her blood turned to ice. He'd tapped their channel. I was hoping they'd send you, Rourke continued, voice calm, even amused. The prodigy, the precision queen. I watched the warehouse. Footage. Nice shot. Clara didn't respond. She motioned for her sniper to switch frequencies and cut external feed. He complied immediately, but the damage was done. Rourke wasn't improvising. He'd studied them, down to names and tactics. This was more than personal. It was a test of legacy. Clara refocused. Team 2, breach on my mark. We'll draw fire from the south. She counted down silently with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. Flashbangs ignited the darkness like thunderclaps. Her team swept forward, weapons raised, movements choreographed like ballet with steel and fire. The forest came alive with motion, but Rourke didn't panic. He fought like a man who had already lost everything and now moved only to prove he couldn't be stopped. He retreated into the control building, dragging the hostage with him. Clara followed. Close, fast, silent, inside the structure. Shadows danced on concrete walls, metal doors screamed open and shut, and water roared beneath the dam's structure like a warning from the earth itself. She navigated the tight stairwells, with brutal focus, her team fanning out behind her. Then came the final room, the turbine hall. Rourke stood on a platform above the worry machinery, the hostage at gunpoint, his eyes locked on Clara. Behind him, the dam spillway one wrong move, and it was over. For all of them. You know why I did this? He asked, voice raw now, stripped of arrogance. They used me up and tossed me out. Protocol over people. Red tape over reality. They gave them everything. You don't walk away from that clean. You don't get to be the hero. Clara kept her weapon trained, her voice steady. You chose this. You had other ways. Rourke laughed bitterly. You think they'll treat you any different, Clara? You think you'll survive the system longer than I did? You'll save them, and they'll still put you on trial. Don't do this for them, she said. I do it for the people they forget, the ones you put in chains. A moment passed. Then the hostage made the smallest of moves, shifting. Her weight just enough to throw Rourke off balance. Clara didn't hesitate. One shot. Not to kill. To disarm, the bullet struck Rourke's forearm, and the gun clattered to the floor. Her team moved instantly, pulling the hostage to safety and tackling Rourke before he could recover. It was over. Clean, fast, precise, but not easy. In the aftermath, as medics loaded the hostage into the ambulance and Rourke was cuffed and carried away in silence, Clara stood by the edge of the dam, staring out at the water. The sky was beginning to bleed orange with the coming dawn. Leland approached, his boots crunching beside hers. Could have taken the kill shot, he said. No one would have questioned it. Clara nodded, eyes never leaving the horizon. No, why didn't you? She took a long breath. Because I'm not him. In the weeks that followed, Clara was offered commendations, promotions, even a public interview with a national network. She turned most of it down. She had learned something during that last mission, something crucial. Being great at your job didn't mean being celebrated. It meant being accountable, measured, knowing when to pull the trigger and when to hold. She didn't need a spotlight. She had something better, a name, a purpose, a team who trusted her, and a legacy that wasn't built on noise or notoriety, but on clarity, courage, and a quiet strength that had never once failed her. The end.